Support for First Coast Connect is provided in part by Baptist Health and North Florida TPO.
Welcome to First Coast Connect. I'm Ann Schindler. Today, one of the fastest growing counties in the country aims to balance development pressures and infrastructure needs. We get an update on how they're managing. Later, a new training program aims to get aspiring veterinarians up and running with the big dogs more quickly. But first, Florida last year saw an average of 922 new residents arrive each day, and a whole lot of them found their way to St. Johns County. It's been that way for more than a decade, and the growth pressures are real. Here to discuss how it started and how it's going, we're joined by St. Johns County Administrator Joy Andrews. Joy, welcome back to the program.
Good morning, Ann.
So last week you updated the County Commission on $820 million in infrastructure projects. That includes more than 100 capital projects that are underway or in the process. But what does that $820 million represent in terms of the total need that exists in St. Johns County? What is the pent-up demand?
Well, that's a great question. I always say I really can't even top of my head to give you a percentage of the need in terms of infrastructure projects, but primarily it's in the categories of transportation, roadway expansion improvement, public safety, parks and libraries, and also coastal protection. And of course, utility is always its own segment of infrastructure projects that needs to be managed alongside with all these other projects and categories.
So if it's fair to say that there is an unmet need and a demand that exists beyond what you have the ability to pay for at this point, I guess the question is kind of how far behind is the county? What would it take to catch up?
Well, $820 million, I would say probably half of it is utility, and the other half of it is the transportation, is the parks and libraries, the public safety and coastal protection. And this is really just covering 2 years of capital improvement projects that we're talking about. And I would say the next 5 years, this is going to continuously to be the same scale and the complexity of the projects that we're going to manage. And I think 5 years from now, we're going to be at a very good point. But I would say by the end of 2027, you're going to see a lot of relief in the congestion. You're going to see a lot of relief in primarily, I think it's the interchange of different major corridors in St. Johns County. And by end of 2027, we're going to have our 4 new regional parks built. And we're going to have our renovation of this one major regional park in Davis Park, primarily in Ponte Vedra and Nocatee, and 3 new libraries built. And that actually is in addition to the new library we just built in Hastings, so 4 altogether. So I think you're going to see a lot of relief in the congestion, really, for the after-school programming, our libraries. And I think the coastal projects is going to be probably in the next 5 to 10 years is going to be continuously to be high demand, especially on the coastline between south of Guana to Fulano. And that's the South Ponte Vedra project that we are working with Army Corps. And that's going to be a 5 to 10 year project.
Sure. I mean, that area is really critically eroded, something that threatens not only the homes, but A1A, which is a highway,
Absolutely.
obviously, that is of significance. When it comes to the relief that is needed, and the tax dollars available, how much of that relief that you're anticipating is coming from the continued growth of St. Johns County?
So our funding approach for these projects strategically for the next 5 and 10 years, hopefully is going to be a good, healthy divide amongst. One is the impact fee, which is paid by the developers. So these ongoing projects are part of the kind of planned development mitigation obligation by these developers. So impact fee is going to play a really major role in the funding makeup for these projects, especially roads, and parks and public safety. Now, coastal projects is completely different animal that we're talking about, different types of a funding structure.
Can I ask you before I just kind of stop you there for a second, if impact fees are playing a major role in financing the infrastructure needs, it is fair to say that continued growth and escalating growth in St. Johns County is part of the calculation, is part of the formula that you're relying on in order to be able to pay for these changes.
That is accurate.
Yeah. And so I just, I'm curious about that because we know that your board ran, a lot of the members on your board of county commissioners ran on a slow growth or no growth platform. And that is something I think they're saying because they're hearing that from the community. And the community has been pretty vocal about feeling like they're fed up with growth and that they don't want to see any more growth. Some want a moratorium, some want a cessation entirely. So how do you square what the community is saying, what your own board has said, at least when they were running for office, with the reality of needing to depend on that growth to pay for future improvements?
So I think it's really a balance act. So our 5 elected officials are tasked with a very challenging task to balance the need for expansion of infrastructure, which really relies heavily on the development's contributions and mitigation obligations. But at the same time, I think it's worthy of noting that a lot of entitlements and anticipated impact fee collection is already in the pipeline. So it's not new development. The board gets to make a policy decision to stop. So if we are looking at 50 to 60,000 entitlements that are already on the book, had been planned and approved, those impact fee collection is going to happen. It's just a matter of timing. So some of the projects that we're planning in the next 5 years is relying on those collection. But if you're talking about decades from now, we were talking about long-term strategic planning. Yes, I think a smart growth, a well-timed growth with a proactive planning for these infrastructure projects is really the goal, and it's the kind of the task of our elected body.
And so if the impact fees that you're going to be collecting, those are projects in the pipeline, and certainly there is a lot in the pipeline. I mean, there's a lot that's going to happen in St. Johns County in terms of growth and development, even if you didn't approve another single project. But would you say that since this new commission took office, that there has been any measurable slowdown or cessation of growth development plans approvals?
Yeah, no doubt about that. I would say the slowing of the new development is absolutely visible and it's palatable. I think the communities can feel it. Least 5,000 units have been denied in the past 3 years. So really the only biggest development, a new development I can remember since I became administrator was the beginning of my my career as administrator was the Greenbrier project in slash Hilo project. And I know at the time that project brings a couple thousand units, I think 3,000 units plus, a huge.
Where is that located?
And that is the northwest part of the county.
Okay.
So it's west part of close to Shearwater and Aberdeen, and west part of 210. Kind of to your point, the balancing act of bringing dollars and resource to expand the roadway projects that you already need played a huge consideration in that approval project. So Hilo project brought in $15 million up front to expand Longleaf Pine Parkway, which was completed winter of last year. So that was really the last project I can recall. And really, I think that was also a response to the residents' desire to see the slowing down of the growth, but at the same time, see meaningful resource to be allocated outside of our taxpayers' dollars to expand those roads.
I want to come back to the subject of roads in just a minute, but in terms of those 5,000 units that were denied, are you seeing those staying off the table now that they've been denied, or are you seeing developers come back with renewed requests or even with lawsuits? So we know that there's a very strong property rights laws in Florida that sometimes allow a developer to sue and say that you're not letting me use this property to its highest and best use. And, then sometimes the county has to come back and say, okay, we're going to approve it after all.
Yeah, I think in the lawsuit that you're talking about, it's a Robinson track. There's definitely that balance act, also how you respect private property rights, but at the same time, legally and respectfully plan the community growth in a way that our current residents who are living here or working here can stomach and also enjoy the quality of life they had expected from this county. I think most of the developers have kind of got the idea that this board is not in any hurry to approve any new development. So we're not seeing a lot of application, at least a large application. Most of the land use items that we have experienced in past probably a couple years are smaller, way smaller scale rezoning or change of the use of residential lots and or approval of some sort of a waivers, but really nothing big. And I think that is really a reflection of the policies that the board has set the tone for the development community.
Some of those choices are out of the hands of the board. Certainly, it went through this long process of community involvement to develop its new comprehensive plan for development, which is basically a 25-year look ahead at how do we want our county to look. And there were many meetings, a lot of input, as we said, and then it goes to the state, and the state basically says they reject it because it's too strong on issues of development. It's too strong on issues of conservation or perhaps things like providing for pedestrians and bicycle paths. So the county then has to soften its comp plan. And so despite all of this input from the county and the support of the citizens for this direction, the state has basically clamped down on that.
Yes. So the state basically passed a law basically saying that any of your long-term strategic planning for your land cannot be overly restrictive and cannot be overly burdensome. So those are the two criteria that basically did.
And who makes the determination of overly burdensome?
I think there is kind of subjective, I would say, subjective, but basically the benchmark is going to be what you had. And so if you are requiring people to have, let's just say, if you require people in the current plan, 25 feet buffer, and you're asking the new development with the new plan a 50 feet buffer, then that is overly burdensome and restrictive. So we can now create more hoops, so to speak, for the new development through this comprehensive plan update.
All right. We have a call from John on the south side. Good morning, John. Go ahead.
Hi, good morning. I watch the concerns of people in St. Johns County about new development and existing communities like Shearwater as an example. I'm through that community quite often, and the roads are actually quite terrible at this point. There's lots of patches and so forth on the roads, and I think that might contribute to, the dismay of some St. Johns County residents that they just can't keep up with the development. How is it that these communities are established with that level of infrastructure that's seemingly inadequate over time? And I'd appreciate it if you could address that. I'll take the call. Thank you.
Thanks, John. I'll ask you to answer that, Joy, but just preface it by saying that Shearwater is off of County Road 210, west of 95, south of 210, which is an area that's seen a tremendous amount of growth.
Yes, and I'm happy to answer that question, John. And that's a great question. I think there is a distinction we have to make. And then usually a development such as Shearwaters, they have their private CDD and they have their own private homeowner association, which usually if they don't dedicate their private roads to the county, they are not county roads. So the quality of the roads...
Is that the case with this one?
In Shearwater, within the community, the Shearwaters roads are part of their CDD maintenance requirement. Now, if we're talking about 210 to get to Shearwater, then that is something the county is working on, and that is the section of the road that we're really working on this year and next year, and hopefully we're going to complete by summer of 2026. That is the widening of Greenbrier and 210.
And so if those roads are under the purview of the developer within the Shearwater community, is there nothing that the county can do at the front end to ensure that those roads are better so that residents aren't living in a overly congested community?
Well, any development when they come in and they ask for whether it's a plan or construction permit, we have design criteria, we have engineering criteria that they have to meet. But then just remember, CDD is its own covenant restriction. It's privately owned and agreed upon, and so the maintenance is truly on the community. And it's on the resource that they can collect in the community.
We've got a call from Sally in Springfield. Good morning, Sally. Go ahead.
Yes, good morning. I wondered if the commissioner could speak on that. I believe it's called an agri-hood that was proposed by a builder, and I think it was on 206, but it was turned down. And to me, it sounded like a great idea for community if there has to be another community. And if they applied again, would you consider it? Thank you.
Thanks, Sally. We should say that Joy is a county administrator, not a commissioner, but she, this agri-hood project was, I think the concern there was that it was going to be turning existing farmlands into essentially a 3,000 home residential property.
Yeah, I think that is, Sally, what you're referencing to, I think, is the Robinson track, which
that is the subject of litigation, right?
That
now?
is the subject of litigation. So I want to be very cautious about really addressing this. But the board had denied this project entirely because of its new entitlement with I would say confidently perceived a lack of infrastructure, primarily roads.
Getting to it.
Yes.
Okay. I do want to ask you about roads. I said I wanted to come back to it. I mean, one of the things is roads to deal with growth, and that's an ongoing challenge. But there's also this issue of road quality being undermined by climate change and the environment and flooding. And so there's a lot of areas of St. Johns County that are starting to experience flood events, rainfall events that kind of destroy the roadbed. You get a much less durable, longer lasting road than you might otherwise. What is the scale of that problem of trying to fix roads that have been damaged by, say, flooding?
I would say it primarily probably is applicable to south portion of the county. So if we're talking about a shore area, and certainly I think A1A along the line of Summer Haven all the way up to Fulano, we have experienced a lot of major storms that has really led to the collapsing of these roadways. So I think that's absolutely a very legitimate concern. But I do want to also add to this topic, the standard of building these roads is also very heavily regulated by the Florida Department of Transportation. So again, there's also the balance act of how much more are you going to require to enhance the standard of the road construction, because what we're experiencing now is the cost of the construction has skyrocketed, which contributed largely to some of the roads were planned for and that are unable to be completed within the timeline that we had expected.
We are talking to Joy Andrews. She is a county administrator in St. Johns County. If you have questions or comments, you can reach us at 904-549-2937. You can also email comments or questions about St. Johns County growth and development to First Coast Connect at wjct.org. We have a call from Bill in Lakewood. Good morning, Bill. Go ahead.
Good morning. Thanks for having me on. And I appreciate what St. Johns County is trying to do to limit development. But I want to throw in there, before I ask my question, that there is such a thing as lands unsuitable for development, and there is such a thing as practical limits to growth. So my question, I want to focus for now on water. Is the county still approving septic for new developments? Because given our water challenges, that's just insane. Also, any new development is drawing more water from the rivers or the aquifers and is putting more effluent back into our waterways. So whether the state wants to recognize that or not, more development in those regards is making St. Johns County a worse place to live, not a better one.
Thank you, Bill, for your comments. The septic is a good question. I know here in Jacksonville, they're spending, I mean, ultimately, it will be probably billions of dollars to remove septic systems that have failed over the years and replace them with sewer. And yet, Duval County and Jacksonville continue to permit projects and entire developments that are on septic systems. What's the situation in St. John's?
I am really not aware of any larger scale of development that is being approved with only septic system. In fact, we are actually doing the opposite. The board just went through a discussion, and we're bringing a policy change before the board for a countywide septic to sewer system conversion program. The program like this is really beneficial for our aquifer, the health of the environment. Um, One thing to be cautioned with that is that there is a cost to the residents because they certainly were paying for a completely different system to be connected to the county system. It requires a lot of connections. It requires really infrastructure. So we're very cognizant about the cost that could go on our residents. So we're developing and designed this program where that we can methodically remove those septic tanks and then connect them to the county sewer system with a affordable payment plan and sort of scaled fee rates for our residents.
To his other point, even if a system is in place that is not a septic system but is a sewer system, that effluent goes somewhere. It goes into the river ultimately, and that has been facing a lot of pollution challenges, algal blooms, high levels of nutrients and things that come from sewage and wastewater. So what is the prospect for just coping with that additional waste stream as growth continues in St. Johns County?
Well, that is really, really good question. It has a very complex answer to it, and I can probably only be qualified to scratch the surface of it. We have experts in the county is actively addressing that issue, but in terms of managing the discharge to our water bodies is highly regulated by the state of Florida Department of Environmental Protection. So there is new Senate bill, House bills that have been passed is regulating the amount of nutrients you can discharge to water bodies. There are very stringent assessments frequently to be done. And I think that also really shifted the way that we can actually manage our wastewater treatment plants. Again, it kind of goes back to the balance of regulation and the cost, and it's very similar to the road. We are going to experience, and I think very similar to JEA in Jacksonville or this region, a higher cost for wastewater treatment, which is going to eventually go on our residents' bills to pay for their water and their wastewater treatment. And those are directly related to the new regulation on how much you can really discharge, or what water body you can discharge. In fact, there's this one a new challenge that we're working through is that at what point that we are disallowed to discharge any wastewater after its treatment, or do we actually incur hundreds of millions of dollars to talk about deep well injection and things like that? So it's a very convoluted question, and the answers really require, I think, from the local level, from the state level, a very methodical and comprehensive views of how we can actually address the environment without overburdening our residents.
I want to ask about the money for infrastructure, because there was this period where all of a sudden there was this money under the Biden administration, this Build Back Better bill, which was basically providing, millions, hundreds of millions or billions of dollars to entire regions for things like bridges and roads and wastewater treatment systems and connectivity. A lot of that money has just gone away under this administration. Were there projects that you were counting on that money for that you now have to find a different funding source for?
I think that the transition of administration certainly brings a lot of challenges in terms of the funding of the projects. There wasn't any, we don't plan for projects with a funding source that is not confirmed. So I think the gap, if any, would occur during the transition. So let's just say I can use one example that is the elimination of railroad off of 210. So we have a railroad going through on US 1 alongside of US 1, and we have on-grade passing of from 210 to US 1, which creates safety issues and also congestions. So during the transition of administration, there were a lot of grants available for railroad elimination for really eliminating the safety concerns.
Is that eliminating the railroad track or creating a flyover?
It is the latter. So it is eliminating the on-grade passing by having a overpass. So that funding was reprogrammed. It became a different program. So we are really in the process of gearing up to figure out what are the projects that is more in line with the new program. So for example, transportation projects. In the past, we had this thing called BRIC grant, and that went away. And but now the new programs has been announced. It's called BUILD grant. It's BUILD. In fact, Chair Murphy and I actually went to DC to specifically talk to DOT staff to figure out how can we win those grants to bring dollars to St. Johns County. So currently we have two projects are in the running. One is the 2209 expansion, interchange expansion.
What road is that?
That is 2209 with 210 interchange. So that's very close to the south portion of 9B. So that it takes you to 9B.
Okay.
And that is very much a bottleneck for northwest part of the county. And the other grant that we are going to very strongly pursue is the expansion of 16, which is from IGP to
International
95.
Golf Parkway.
Yes.
To 95. That's on State Road 16.
Yes, and that's about 6 mile stretch. And again, going back to kind of the cost, because of the construction standard and things like that, it's probably close to $150 million.
Wow. We are talking to Joy Andrews. She's the county administrator in St. Johns County. If you have questions about growth or management in St. Johns County, you can email First Coast Connect at wjct.org, or you can call us live on air at 904-549-2937. We've been talking a lot about the northern portion of the county, sort of the middle portion of the county. I want to talk about the southern portion of the county, which is less developed. Some of it is large agricultural lands, and those lands could be impacted by a bill that's moving through the legislature right now in Tallahassee, this so-called blue ribbon bill. It would label projects of a certain size, essentially a very large size. It would put them beyond the purview of the county commission or the residents. It would essentially shut them out of the process if they met some criteria for development. And we've talked a little bit on this program before about this blue ribbon bill, but what are you hearing from your commission? What are you hearing from residents who might have concerns? I mean, there are a couple of very large parcels in southern St. Johns County that could essentially be developed to the whim of a developer with no local input whatsoever if this bill was approved.
Well, our board members individually, we have not had a so-called sunshine discussion amongst the five related to this bill yet. But I think every individual commissioners from the five elected officials are concerned about the impact of this bill. We are very closely monitoring where this bill is going through, and I think it has gone through one of the committees. So we're monitoring the progress of it. The bill of such a complexity with such a large impact, we expect that to go through a fairly long process. So yeah, I think that is something that is definitely high on the list of our legislative monitoring.
And is it something that you're hearing anything from residents about so far? Any concerns from the community?
Not myself personally, particularly, but we have a couple, let's say PZA members who often attend our board meetings, and we have some private discussions about the type of impact it may have on St. Johns County.
That's the planning and zoning
Yes.
administrators?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. We've got a call from Mike in St. Johns County. Good morning, Mike. Go ahead.
Yeah, my question, I'm going back to County Road 210 now. I'm talking about the portion from Greenbrier down to about Cimarron, that portion specifically. That has taken way too long, and it's still not finished. You've been working on it over 3 years. And I guess it's after the fact now how the commissioners, maybe previous commissioners, approved all this crazy growth without the infrastructure in place. But that's terrible. It takes at least twice as long to get anywhere out here when it's busy because of all the traffic back up there. When is that going to be done? I heard you said the Greenbrier portion is going to be done like this summer, but this thing should have been done long before that. I think you started on this before you did that Greenbrier section.
Mike, thank you for your comments. That's something I guess you've probably not the first time you've heard that.
Yeah. So the whole section of West 210 is, even though they look like a continuation of 210, they are funded very differently. Some of them are funded with prior development obligation, which a lot of time the collection of those prop share is very much related to the phasing of the project. And I think this listener was right that some of the projects were approved long ago, not even just a few years ago, probably a decade ago. So phasing of these projects really affect the ability of us collecting the funding to actually put that into the project. And there's a portion of the 210 was also funded by strictly St. Johns County's General Fund and Transportation Trust Fund. So there is a lot of coordination and collaboration of different sections and who's paying for what. But I think one lesson our board has learned is that the phasing approach of these development is no longer working for St. Johns County. And that's why I mentioned earlier that Hilo project was approved because a one-time lump sum upfront construction dollars to be contributed to the project. But I think slowly we're going to phase out some of those projects that were approved long time ago and collecting those construction dollars and resources to put them into actual projects.
You mean when you say phase out projects that were developed already, what does that mean?
So let's just say 15 years ago that there was a project, and I won't even name the name, but typical method of approving these projects is they are phased as they grow. So let's just say a project has 3 phases, and each phase has 500 homes. So back then, I think the method, and I think this predates many of us, is that if you build 500 homes, then you'll be obligated to do certain things. Either you're going to build a section of the road on your own to our standard, or you're going to contribute, say, $10-15 million to be part of that construction as a proportionate share. And then if you don't meet that obligation, you will not move on to the next phase. So you will be stopped at phase 1. So that really is very much what we have experienced with the Grand Oaks, which is right off of 16. And they were stopped right at phase 1 without
because
ability,
they weren't paying for the roads?
Because they really didn't have ability to pay for the roads because the timing of the construction, the cost of the construction has changed drastically. So I think it kind of goes back to the question about 210 and goes back to the question about what is the right approach to, if we were to approve any development, to require our developer to contribute. We do have larger developments such as Silverleaf or Nocatee. They are kind of a master plan development. So their transportation is well planned in advance and construction by the developers, which is going to be very much preferred approach in the future.
Yeah, and just very briefly, this objections by residents to growth in St. Johns County dates back 15 or 20 years. And at the time, people would say this is going to be ruinous for the county. Do you think that there's anything 20 years from now, are people going to look back on this county commission and your administration and say, well, they got it right? Or do you think they were going to be hearing the same complaints that we are right now about 210 and what's happening on State Road 16 20 years from now?
Well, if 20 years from now and that the residents are still going to experience the same challenge today, which is very much catching up the infrastructure to meet the needs of new residents, then I feel like I'm not doing my job properly. And this is why we are now putting in long-term transportation planning committee together. We're looking at transportation model in conjunction with TPO and also our school system to plan those major roads and corridors to move people as quickly as we can in advance of any potential trip counts that is going to be put on the road. So that is our hope and our goals.
All right. Well, it's good to talk to you. St. Johns County Administrator Joy Andrews, thanks so much for being available and talking to us today.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Up next, a hands-on training program to let aspiring veterinarians help pets. Welcome back. A local nonprofit providing affordable pet care is now offering veterinary students a chance for hands-on training and experience. Here to tell us about it is Jennifer Barker, Chief Executive Officer of EveryPet. Good morning, Jennifer.
Good morning. Thanks for having us.
We're also joined by Dr. Brian DeGangi, the group's Director of Professional Development. Thanks for being here, Doctor.
Good morning.
All right. So, Jennifer, EveryPet just opened this new veterinary student training center at the Norwood Spay and Neuter Center and Community Clinic. And I want to talk about that. But first, I want to ask about the rebrand, because you guys, until very recently, were known as First Coast No More Homeless Pets. Now you're known as EveryPet. Why the name change?
Yes. We were thrilled to announce the name change to EveryPet on October 1st. So we've been operating here in Jacksonville for over 20 years. And under the name First Coast No More Homeless Pets, people sometimes thought we were a shelter, and we're actually not a shelter. What we do is we focus on preventative care. We offer affordable veterinary care through 2 locations in Jacksonville. And then we also operate one of the largest spay and neuter clinics in the country. Our mission has not changed. We just introduced a new name. So we are now known as EveryPet, affordable quality vet care for all.
Dr. DeGangi, what is the need? What is the motive for trying to bring in students and run this fellowship program to get veterinary students kind of in the field and working and learning the skill?
Yeah, there's a huge need for more veterinarians across the country in general, and particularly in our field of accessible care, community-centered care, and shelter medicine. And so we're trying to contribute to that by helping train these veterinary students who they often don't get a whole lot of surgical experience during their prescribed curriculum in vet school. It's not uncommon for veterinarians to graduate having done half a surgery in their vet school career. And so we like to be able to offer this opportunity for them to come and spend time with us in a one-on-one environment, spending usually 2 weeks at a time, really focused on honing those surgical skills so they can be practice ready when they get out into the real world.
Can you talk a little bit about what community care is when it comes to these kinds of facilities? Because yours is a really, as you said, it's like a high volume facility. It's sort of a different environment for someone who's learning this craft. What do they have to learn that's different than they might at some other fellowship or some other training program?
Yeah, so we are a high-quality, high-volume spay-neuter clinic at our Norwood location, and the training center is unique in that we have this high-volume facility, but we also have a dedicated, designated space, purpose-built for training veterinary students. So a smaller OR, a smaller prep and recovery area that's off to the side, so they can still participate in the main operations of the facility, but in a more controlled, relaxed environment so that they can learn these skills safely.
And it's my understanding, Jennifer, that they're kind of paired with mentors, a doctor and a vet tech, to kind of give them feedback and help them through their process. Who are you targeting as in terms of students? And just tell us a little bit about the fellowship program itself. Who is it for? Who do you want to apply? And what does it provide for?
So we love welcoming veterinary students, not only here locally, but from universities from all across the country. And we're really targeting individuals that have compassion for vulnerable pet populations and want to get involved and make a difference in their community. This fellowship program is available to any veterinary student from any university across the country, first through fourth year veterinary students. We are currently accepting applications and will be onboarding 2 fellows this summer.
Is this a free program?
This is a free program available to students, and it's also a paid training program. So they will be receiving a stipend to participate in the program.
Dr. DeGangi, are veterinary students required to have some sort of training like this hands-on, or before they can practice? Like, what is the protocol?
Yeah, so the AVMA sets the standards for what veterinary students are required to be able to do before they graduate veterinary school. And so some of that time is allotted for them to do externships and to do clinical experiences in real practices out in the world. And so students come to us, they elect to come to us on either an externship block or a vacation period in some cases because they just want that extra hands-on experience.
Tell us a little bit about this kind of care. And when you talk about meeting the need of vulnerable animals or even vulnerable communities who have animals, who is your clientele and what makes these animals vulnerable? How is the work that you do different than perhaps just a private vet?
Mm-hmm. We're very unique because we want to remove any financial barrier to families being able to afford the cost of care. Especially today, we see rising costs of veterinary medicine, certainly in traditional emergency or specialty practices. And so we want to make sure that families can make the right choice for their pet. That's why we offer not only affordable veterinary care, we have a variety of payment plans, and then a core part of our mission is to provide charitable veterinary care. And we make sure that we have the ability to provide life-saving intervention when there is a pet that's critically injured.
And so you have almost low-income guidelines for people, like if they're receiving SNAP benefits or they're receiving Medicaid, you kind of use those to determine whether they're eligible for some of your free services?
Particularly in our spay and neuter center.
Okay.
So we do have families that can qualify for a no-cost spay or neuter, and then there would be some eligibility requirements like you just mentioned. But other than that, our services, our full-service veterinary hospital, open 7 days a week, is open to the public, and all families are welcome to access our services.
You also do these spay and neuters for people who bring in, for instance, a certain number of cats from the cat population, if they're trying to do maybe like a trap and neuter and return type thing for cats in their community. And so that is also something that I believe is free for at least Duval County residents. Is that the case?
Yeah, so we have programs where Duval County residents can bring, I think it's up to 6 cats, community cats per month, and that's covered by grant funding.
So if people are interested in learning more about the program, how do they get involved? How do they apply in the first place? And what is the timeline, Jennifer, for them doing so?
Mm-hmm. So for our training program, we're currently accepting those fellowship applications. You can apply through our website at everypet.org. And if you want to get involved or if you're needing to access our services, you can go to our website. You can book online appointments. And any question that you might have can be answered through our hotline, which is 904-425-0005.
Dr. Genji, I wonder if you could just talk as somebody that practices in this space of care for animals that are perhaps vulnerable or even kind of working in a high volume facility like you do. What is the calling there?
Yeah, to me, it's a real privilege to work in this field because I get to help the animals that need my help the most. And we get to help a lot of them. And so the impact is, for me, much broader than it would be if I was working in a private practice. And adding on top of that, the layer of working with students and training the next generation of veterinarians so I can spread that knowledge and that passion a little bit further.
All right. Well, it sounds like a very cool program. We appreciate you coming on to tell us about it today. Jennifer Barker, Dr. Brian DeGangi, thanks so much for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Up next, we talk to a couple of folks who have become band goers 52 weeks a year. This is their 3rd year doing it, and we'll meet one of them.
Scenic Jacksonville presents the Great Cities Symposium on February 5th. Victor Dover, city builder and town planner, shares how he has transformed cities, streets, and neighborhoods through urban design across the U.S. Tickets available at scenicjacksonville.org. Terrell Hogan Law.
I'm Wayne Hogan. Accidents can happen when you least expect it. For decades, our attorneys have dug out the facts to help juries decide who's at fault.
More at terrellhoganlaw.com.
Film at WJCT presents You Got Gold, a celebration of John Prine, a star-studded tribute event to one of history's greatest songwriters. Join icons like Bonnie Raitt, Brandi Carlile, Jason Isbell, and more as they share intimate stories and perform his classic songs. Critics call it a joyous tribute and a conversation with memory. January 28th at WJCT Studios. Doors open at 6:30, film starts at 7. Popcorn and cash bar available. Go to wjct.org/film for tickets.
On the next Fresh Air, Tucker Carlson's rise to becoming one of the most powerful figures on the far right. Political reporter Jason Zingerle joins us to discuss his new book, Hated by All the Right People, where he argues that Carlson's trajectory mirrors the 30-year transformation of conservative politics and media. Join us.
Today at noon on WJCT News 89.9.
The U.S.'s place on the global stage looks very different now than it did a year ago. We hear from 3 foreign journalists a year into covering the second Trump administration about how they're thinking about President Trump's approach to foreign policy and the greater implications of that approach on the global order. That's next time on 1A.
Today starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
Welcome back. It started as something like a dare, a musical challenge that has now grown into an annual tradition between friends. Here to talk about the pair's third year of 52 bands in 52 weeks is music fan Jason Roth. He's the owner of Castaway's Vintage to Modern and just a general big fan of live music. Welcome.
3 years. I can't believe that we've been doing this long, and thank you for continuing to have us back.
Yeah, we'd love to have you on for sort of a look back at the year that was in music, because nobody is seeing more of it than you guys. We should say your buddy on this, Heather Schatz, could not be here, so it's all on you today,
I'm
Jason.
going to have to carry it all on my shoulders.
You're going to have to carry it all.
Yeah.
So tell us, first of all, how this began for people who aren't familiar with this odd mission that you guys chose.
Yeah, if you're not tuning in every year to hang on every word that we're saying. We had Heather and I had just been going to a lot of shows. We had a really great series, the Jack's River Jam series, a couple of years ago here in Jacksonville, and I kind of looked at her one night and I said, "Hey, you realize we've been seeing like a show a week?" And it sort of turned into a challenge. Like, could we see a show a week? And so it was a little bit hard the first year. We had to stretch the calendar. Summers are always really hard. But by the end of December, we had already hit 52 weeks of music and seen 52 shows. And, we didn't plan on doing it for the second year, but things just kind of fell into place. And now it's kind of a mission in life.
Yeah. And you're overachievers. So this year you actually saw 61 shows. You're not stopping at 52. I'm curious, it seemed like maybe you've loosened up the band definition a little bit. I mean, the show is a show, right? But some of the ones that are listed are Les Mis, Extravaganza, which I think is the Douglas Anderson School of the Arts.
Yeah. And by the way, it's coming up. Always a great variety show. It's like one of the hidden gems.
It usually sells out, I think.
Always, yeah. The rules have always been that we have to be intentional, right? We can't catch, whoever's playing for happy hour at the bar. It has to be something that we're buying a ticket for, that we're going out to support our local live music scene. We can't just say a street performer that we saw. I mean, Heather always tries to, send me little videos of her vacations, like, "Hey, check this out. Does this work?" And I'm like, "No."
There's a steel drum band.
No, that's not the way it works. You have to go buy a ticket. You have to support our local music scene.
Yeah, and some of the ones that you supported are close to our heart. You went to see the Electro Lounge show at the Planetarium. You went to Porch Fest in Springfield. And those are obviously kind of big community investments, not just music events.
Right. And I would be remiss if I didn't say that this was really the year that Jacksonville came into their own on music. I know that Nashville is known as the Music City, but Jacksonville's nipping on its heels. We had so many really great venues open up this year.
Yeah, talk about that.
Yeah, a year ago, Heather and I were really excited about DECA Live that was opening up on Bay Street, really a key component of our downtown revitalization.
And big bands coming there. And Nico Case just
they lived up to the hype.
Mhm.
They kicked off about a year ago with Cascade, and they're celebrating a year on Saturday with Bene Beneze. We're super excited about that show. But I'd probably, I think probably a dozen and a half shows at DECA, tier one EDM artists, but not just EDM artists. We saw Houndmouth there. It's just a really great venue. And they're going to continue to bring tier one artists here because the owners of DECA are also booking for Miami and Orlando. So they're kind of leveraging their booking capacity to bring tier one acts here. So Jacksonville's now being categorized in the same category as, Miami, Tampa, Orlando, and we're getting a huge benefit for it.
And I want to just run through some of the names. You went to see some, classic artists, Roots, Bright Eyes, Vampire Weekend, Old Crow Medicine Show. You did some throwbacks like Quad City DJs and Blind Melon, a lot of electronic and EDM. You saw Bob Moses, Seba San, Future Joy, Flux Pavilion. You saw Shaq, like the basketball player?
Shaq, man. DJ Diesel, is great. He just brought some energy. Like DECA's they've been booking some really great acts and some really great energy. You just mentioned Flux Pavilion. They are such a great act. And I was so happy to be able to see them and bring some quality here. I just want to go back and talk about the venues real quick because don't sleep on that venue
in 5 Points.
In 5 Points. I know that we all miss Sunray, but
that's been an issue for some
people.
It's
been an issue, but that club has historically been a music venue, and now it's doing what it has historically done.
And you've had a good time at that venue.
Oh, it is just honestly, pound for pound, it's probably the best mid-tier club. Ponte Vedra Concert Hall, the renovation is great, and we've got tickets for the Wood Brothers next week up in the Tiger Island Room in Fernandina. I haven't been there yet, but I hear it's a small room, and they're booking some really big acts, and so I'm really looking forward to an intimate experience up there.
Well, it is great to check in with you, Jason Roth. We love that you are doing, so much participation in the cultural community, but also that you report back to us at the end of the year.
Yeah, always happy to come.
We can live vicariously through you.
In addition to Castaways Vintage Modern, we also have a record store in the back called Castaways Records. So our motto is follow the music.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that you're following the music. It's good to see you again. Thanks, Jason.
Thanks for having me.
All right, and that's our program. Thanks for listening. If you missed anything, you can find all of our past and current shows at firstcoastconnect.org. And while you're there, go ahead and sign up for our new daily newsletter. First Coast Connect is produced by Stacey Bennett. Our associate producer is Isabella Casapow. Our show is directed by Brady Corum, and our theme music is performed by Club de Belugas. Join us tomorrow when we hear from a new collective that believes that when it comes to local reporting, there's strength in numbers. I'm Ann Schindler. You've been listening to First Coast Connect on WJCT News 89.9.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided by Baptist Health and the North Florida TPO.
The North Florida TPO is committed to shaping our transportation future. We're focused on planning, funding, clean fuels, and new technologies for a vibrant, connected community. Learn more at northfloridatpo.com. Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com. The Amelia Island Chamber Music Festival presents the Orpheus Chamber Orchestra, celebrating 50 years, with pianist Marc-Andre Hamlin in music by Liszt and Schubert. Tuesday, March 3rd at First Baptist Church. Tickets available at ameliachambermusic.org.
This is WJCT News